Hello and welcome back to Comics Over Time. This season, which we're calling Murdock and Marvel, a history of Marvel Comics starring Daredevil, we're breaking down the year in the comic book industry in two parts. In part one, we'll look at the state of the comic book industry as a whole, as well as what things were going on in society that may have impacted the comic book industry during that year. We'll talk big picture about what's going on at DC and independent comics, then we'll shift our focus to Marvel. We'll look at who is creating comics, what new characters or storylines were introduced, and which comics debuted or ended. In part two, we'll dive deep into Marvel's longest-running characters, Matt Murdock. We'll look at what the year had in store for the Man Without Fear, key things that happened, and who joined or left his world before spotlighting one key issue or story. From there, we'll wrap up the year's discussion with a takeaway before moving on to another year and a whole new discussion. We're excited to have you join us on a trip through comic book history. We are back for part two of 2007, the year in Daredevil. My name is Dwayne, and with me, as always, is my good buddy Dan. Dan, how you doing this week?
Excellent. It'll be fun. This is exciting. Cool week of Daredevil. So
we do get our second year of Ed Brubaker on the main title. We had the completion of Daredevil Father, which we've talked about kind of the last 2 years, I feel like, in the year in Daredevil. There was a pretty cool Daredevil annual this year as well. So and plus, because of 420 titles like we talked about last week, Daredevil appeared all over the place too.
Yeah, he really did.
So
we've got that list you put together.
Yeah, the list, it's not getting short. It is definitely not getting short. But we're gonna focus on that main run, and it's another really good year. So why don't we jump in and talk about what happened to Daredevil in 2007? The year in Daredevil.
All right, Dwayne. So we are starting out 2007 with a bunch of different stuff. So why don't you give us an idea of what's going on in the main run, Daredevil number 91 up through 101?
Yeah, that is the main place that you saw Daredevil and Matt Murdock this year. As we mentioned, he had an annual, and the Daredevil Father run ended this year. But like Ed Brubaker took over last year, couple issues in, he is the writer behind this whole year, and pretty good year because we eclipsed 100 issues. Issue 100 happened near the end of the year, and Ed Brubaker actually came up with the story that was the Daredevil annual number one as well. So Ed Brubaker's got his hands all over Daredevil this year when it comes to what was going on. As far as the artwork across the books, we have Michael Lark, who came on with Ed Brubaker last year. He did a majority of the books this year. There was a couple that he, or only one, I guess, that he wasn't a part of. Issue 94. Lee Weeks actually came back and did issue 94. And then the issue 100, because it was a big Century title, we actually had 7 artists, including Michael Lark, that appeared on there. And there were some people, that I know you and I both really like. Gene Colan came back and was part of that issue. Bill Sienkiewicz.
Yep.
Dan is a huge fan of Bill Sienkiewicz, if you remember back in our Moon Knight days. Alex Maleev came back as well. So a lot of familiar names that have done a lot of good Daredevil work came back for that 100th issue. Absolutely. As you'd expect. As far as art, it was Stefano Gardino, did basically everything except issue 100 this year. And then it was him and Al Milgrom doing issue 100 because it was they dubbed it a triple size issue. So there was a lot in there. But if you're looking outside of the main Daredevil run, he was in all sorts of stuff. It looks like he was in an X-23 series called Target, all 6 issues of that. He was all over Spider-Man. He was in Black Panther. He's in a bunch of the Civil War books. There was a series called Bullet Point that he was in a few issues of. He was in Wonder Man #5, The Death of Captain America #1 that we talked about a little bit last week. There was a Marvel Zombies Dead Days single issue that he appeared in as well. And some of the wrap-up books on the Civil War stuff, Civil War Chronicles, and Civil War Confession #1. So a lot of Matt Murdock and Daredevil if you wanted to find him this year.
But almost all of those were small appearances too, from what I've
seen.
It's not a lot of them were big appearances.
Yeah. So if we're looking at the main Daredevil run, the 2007 begins actually with that final 3 parts of the Devil Takes a Ride storyline that we talked about last year, that involved Matt Murdock going to Europe and confronting Vanessa Fisk for all the trouble that she's been causing him, as well as then freeing Wilson Fisk from prison and then getting him basically kicked out of the U.S. Or as part of the deal for him getting out of prison. So that was kind of how the year started. But in April, we get a one book story called Our Love that actually has a very cool cover from John Romita Sr. that talks about the relationship between Mila Donovan and Matt Murdock, which was actually really interesting because it was basically from her point of view, and it kind of rehashed their introduction, their meeting, their courtship, and what it's been like basically being the girlfriend and then eventually wife of a superhero, because and how he's never there for her basically.
I wonder if, I mean, this is very much a filler issue because it is mostly just sort of, rehashing stuff that's already happened before and the like. I wonder if partly, though, it's not that Milla and that relationship were mostly something from the Bendis era, and that people who've come in at the Brubaker-Lark era, and especially if you're thinking of the trades, if someone's starting with the trades there, if this doesn't sort of give some context to the relationship that's going to be important to what happens in the next year or so when Milla and some of the stuff that's happening with her kind of takes center stage. I don't know if that is it, but the story itself was kind of a page through it thing for me, but I think it may have made a lot of sense for folks who hadn't been following along with the series since #1,
Yeah, I would say so, and it does. I mean, I thought it was really interesting in that, like, you don't always see that perspective when you're seeing the comic books. You're seeing the superhero. You're not seeing the girlfriend or the significant other of that. And yeah, I feel like being the wife of the superhero, it's going to be important eventually. And so I think I ended up appreciating her a little bit more after reading this book, and just what it's like to sort of be put second time after time after time.
Well, and also, though, that she's eyes wide open on this. One of the few things that is different is that Milla does not, it seems, continue to tell him it's you or, it's Daredevil or me,
Uh-huh.
She's like, this is who he is, and I'll just kind of hang here until somebody murders me, because that's probably going to happen, because that's what happens. And somehow or another, she seems more resigned almost to this being her fate. She's had outs.
Yeah.
And then she comes back in.
Yeah, she served him with divorce papers, asked to get divorced, and he signed the papers, and then she came back.
But interestingly, not because of anything with his superheroics, because she'd been convinced that he was in love with the ghost of Karen Page or whatever. So at no point do I remember her ever trying to tell him, you can't be
N-
Daredevil,
No.
which makes her very different in terms of she is accepting him for the crazy person he is and accepting that her life's going to be crazy. Doesn't mean she's necessarily happy with it,
No.
but it's like, this is, I've chosen this person. This is who they are. This is what I have to deal with now.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we get a long story arc titled To the Devil His Due, and in which Matt Murdock and the law firm are brought in to defend Melvin Potter. Melvin Potter, you remember, is the gladiator who he's gone head to head with as Daredevil a bunch of times and who has been accused of killing inmates at Rikers Island, where he's being held in prison. Melvin claims that he didn't do it, even though all the evidence points to the fact that he did. And as the story progresses, Potter escapes prison and goes on a killing spree, which doesn't make it look like he didn't do it, the thing in prison. Meanwhile, Mila starts going to a psychiatrist. And if that's not enough, we have Lily Luca, the woman who double-crossed Murdock in Europe during the Devil Takes a Ride story, comes to New York looking for Murdock's help. That's all we need is another sort of pseudo love interest coming into the picture, because she was the one that had kind of the special like scent thing that made Matt Murdock think she was Karen Page, reminded her of Karen Page.
She had the perfume she wore that made people remember their fondest memory or the thing
Yes.
that whatever. And yeah, and now even though she stopped wearing the perfume, somehow it's gotten into her skin and she's become this constant sort of source of men fighting over her and everything like this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. It's interesting to see kind of how that's all working out, and obviously Milla does not like her.
No, that is definitely, yeah. Because he, like, I think mentioned to her what happened in Europe and that this woman was there and all this and so she's familiar that they were together a little bit while they were in Europe. Yes. And so this story goes on. Melvin Potter ends up showing up and ruining a dinner date between Mila and Matt. And it's during that Murdock figures out that there's someone behind the Gladiator's recent behavior changes. And in the process, as he's figuring this out, he has to actually stop the Gladiator from killing Mila. So, hey, we were just talking about the fact she thinks she's probably going to die because of being with him. And then, like, immediately that almost happens.
Yep, exactly.
The story ends with Melvin Potter getting arrested and Daredevil turning his sights on the person behind Potter's behavior change. And it's none other than Mr. Fear. Mr. Fear, Larry Cranston, who we haven't seen in actually, I don't think we've even seen him in Volume 2, have we?
It seems like, from what we're hearing, he has been put into some sort of witness protection and is now teaching, or is just in hiding, and is teaching at a community college. And somehow or another, the man who came to Murdock's new associate, the woman who's now an associate with them, was in like some night class with the guy, and that's how he got a hold of them and somehow convinced him to start this whole thing. So,
but I mean, we haven't seen Mr. Fear the villain.
Not at all. Absolutely not.
In this entire second volume.
Ages.
Yeah, I feel like it was Volume 1. So it's been a while since this game. So this is a throwback. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, in a moment of jealous rage directed towards Lily, which actually may have been in no small part helped out by Mr. Fear and his new gas, Mila accidentally kills a man in the subway. attempting to
Yeah.
push Lily Luca, ends up bumping into a guy, another random person in the subway, and he gets basically put in front of a subway train as it came through.
That sounds right. Yeah, and I'd say definitely it was a matter of um she was under the influence of whatever and the like, and that's how this happened.
Yeah,
So he is behind it. Like
yes,
Mr. Fear essentially causes her to murder somebody.
we don't actually know that. We didn't know that immediately, but as the story then progressed after this, I think
Didn't
we
we know
learned.
that?
No, like we saw that Mila was starting to act really weird.
I just assumed that she wasn't really angry enough at Lily to push her into a subway train. So maybe I just thought more of Milla than that. I don't know. Because yeah, we saw it and all these other people had been going crazy, so I just kind of assumed it,
Okay,
even at the time. But
sure.
yeah, we don't actually hear, I guess.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's kind of crazy stuff. So she is suddenly in trouble with the cops and being
Yes.
taken off. I did look it up, by the way. It looks like Daredevil number 375 was the last time we had seen him
Okay, so right at the tail end of volume one.
of
Then.
volume one. So we've not seen him at all in volume two, which is interesting because, they talk about how a hero and their best villains are almost like mirror images of themselves. You would think that for a character subtitled The Man Without Fear, a villain named Mr. Fear would be an absolutely perfect foil.
Yes.
And that he would be somebody who would get more time. But in actual fact, evidently not. He's been gone for over a decade now.
Yeah. So this leads us directly into a triple-sized issue 100, which features 7 artists, and it is a huge it's the first issue of a huge 6-part story titled Without Fear that finishes 2007 and actually bleeds into 2008. Issue 100 is going to be our spotlight story for this week, so we're not going to go into a lot of detail on it right now, but suffice to say for this recap, Daredevil confronts Larry Cranston, aka Mr. Fear, but Fear is able to escape, and when Matt Murdock returns home, he learns that Mila has been arrested for murder.
Yep.
Yeah. So as the Without Fear story continues, we actually see our man Turk, who's been one of the Kingpin's underlings a bunch throughout the years. He's now in the employ of the Hood, who actually has some of his own designs on New York City and by extension Hell's Kitchen. Daredevil goes on to learn of a chemist who assisted Mr. Fear with his latest version of the fear gas, and that chemist is now dead. And Mila fails her psych evaluation and is sent to Bellevue Hospital under protective custody. Now, Mila is eventually allowed to return home with a home health nurse to monitor her actions, but then she attacks the nurse after being visited by Lily Luca again, which gets her sent back to Bellevue. Hood and Fear team up for a time to wreak havoc in New York City, but end up disagreeing on what the big picture was. And I think the big picture sort of revolved around how to deal with with Daredevil. So ultimately, the Without Fear storyline ends with Daredevil confronting Mr. Fear, demanding a cure for Mila's condition, to which Fear reveals that there is no antidote to his latest iteration of the fear gas. Then Daredevil turns him over to Detective Kurtz. Cranston confesses that he was responsible for Melvin Potter and Mila Donovan's recent actions and claims he did it to Matt Murdock because he doesn't like him. And just basically was envious and didn't like him and wanted to destroy him. Lily Luca, who went to Murdock's home because of Mr. Fear, has disappeared, and Murdock tells Foggy he's responsible for ruining Mila's life. So it really sort of ends on a downer. And in fact, like the final page is actually Turk and the Hood kind of looking down at Matt Murdock in his apartment, and they're like, well, we could just, go get him right now, basically is what Turk says. And like the Hood's like, nah, nah, no, this guy's been through enough. Let's give him a small victory that he took down Mr. Fear. He's dealing with enough right now. So things are so bad that the Hood, who wants to basically take over New York City and Hell's Kitchen, feels bad enough for Matt Murdock and Daredevil right now that he's not going to basically pounce on an opportunity to attack him.
Oh. And how amazing is it, by the way, that as we reach issue 100 of the second series, Turk is still around.
He is.
I think this guy has been one of the longest running characters in the Daredevil comics. Like, he has been around forever.
Yes.
And somehow he goes through different bosses. He tries to take over. He does this, he does that, and he keeps surviving. And I'm kind of amazed by that, actually. So
you would have thought by now he would have met his end at some point with everything that he's been involved or around during Daredevil.
Yeah, he, like, Daredevil 69 was his first appearance. And somehow, all the way since 1970, he just keeps showing up, getting in trouble. Nobody's ever killed him off, at least up through issue 101. And he just keeps rolling. So, yeah, kind of crazy.
So that's the main Daredevil run. Meanwhile, in the Daredevil annual that ends up getting released with a cover date of December of 2007, we have Carlos Muerta, aka the Black Tarantula, is released on parole from Rikers, and he looks up his old prison buddy, Matt Murdock, for a job, and tries to help get his life back in order. And though it ends up working for a time, he ends up working for Matt Murdock at the law firm with Dakota North, and that those two are kind of working together. Ultimately, they end up going their separate ways, in part because I think the Black Tarantula wanted to use some of the money that some of these people that are committing crime that Daredevil ends up punishing. They basically end up with piles of money on the table, and he wants to take it and do some good with it. And Daredevil's like, we don't do that. And he actually like takes out Daredevil right at the end of the annual and takes some money and like brings it to a church and says he wants to help out people and all this sort of thing. But it was just really interesting because it's like, this was the guy that when he was in prison at Rikers tried to recruit him to be a part of his gang in prison.
Yep.
And obviously Matt Murdock wasn't going to join his gang because he kind of looks down on criminals basically. But then he ultimately ends up trying to give him a hand when he gets out. And yeah.
Yep.
But I really liked this story, actually. It was an Ed Brubaker story. Andre Parks was the writer. Leo Fernandez and Scott Klobush were on the art. I really liked the art of this as well. So if you get a chance to look at this book, I thought it was really interesting.
It sounds good. Yeah, I have not read that one, actually. I didn't read the annuals back in the day, and I haven't read it this time. So I will have to check that out. But the other one that I think I mentioned to you, the Battle and Jack Murdock, actually is another one that is pretty cool. It's actually interesting story, and the fact that it does kind of add a little bit more color into Jack Murdock's life is sort of interesting. So we see a little bit more of Matt and how he dealt with his father's death and stuff like that too. So it does have a little bit of Daredevil in it, or Matt Murdock in it as well. So
no, I missed that in part because it's like it didn't show up on the appearance list that we put together. So it was just like,
that's weird.
Yeah,
that's on me. I got a bad algorithm evidently. So yeah,
I don't know. So yeah, so it was another eventful year for Matt Murdock, and like another really good set of stories. And I don't know that I was missing Mr. Fear as a villain, but to your point, I think he's a really good villain for Daredevil. And so to finally have him come back after so long, very unexpected to me.
Yeah, it's interesting, and Daredevil has a history of this now, where these characters, kind of like Mysterio in the very first run of or the first arc of this run. He's kind of hanging in the background, and he hadn't been doing much for a while, and then gets brought back sort of as a surprise. This is kind of a callback in a little ways to that. Take a villain that hasn't been used for a while, make them the big bad, and then sort of reveal them in the last act. So I liked it. I think it was well done, and it was a pretty cool usage of the character. Also, the fact that he'd been gone so long would have made it quite a surprise back at the time. I think a lot of people would have had to go, okay, what is a Mr. Fear, and why am I supposed to know him? So.
But I remember him being actually a pretty big deal in Volume 1. He was a villain that came, and there were 3 or 4 big story arcs, and he was a pretty big thorn in Daredevil's side, and so it was very interesting to see him come back. But and the fact that he basically didn't really get revealed until issue 102 sort of makes it kind of interesting, because it was like we had this whole story with Melvin Potter, and then Mila starts acting weird, and you're not quite sure why. And so the name doesn't even come up till basically issue 99, and then we don't actually know and what's going on and actually see Mr. Fear until issue 100, which ends up being this really big issue.
Yep. And it's interesting probably in that, it kept talking about, oh, it's someone from out of the past and whatever. Lark or Brubaker is very cognizant to the fact this guy's been out of the public eye for a while, and he's kind of playing that up. Probably when you think of the fact there's like the fear gas thing and whatever, the fact that she's got a perfume that does this, there's probably a lot of people who were guessing this as the series went along. But there's also a lot of folks who would have not known who this character is, and it would have been a complete surprise. And I didn't really, when I was rereading them here, I didn't really think a whole lot about how long it had been since Mr. Fear had been gone. But I bet back when I was first reading them in the, now it came to mind immediately, because I'm like, oh, I bet that's Mr. Fear. Partly because I'd already read them years ago, and partly because we'd been reading Volume 1 not that long ago. But I bet in 2007, when I was reading these, I did not remember and put it together until I saw it or close to them.
Right. So let's go over and let's jump into the spotlight. Let's talk about what happens in that first big issue, Daredevil 100. This week's spotlight story.
All right, Dwayne. Now we have the spotlight. You've chosen Daredevil number 100, October 2007, the first part of Without Fear. We've already talked about this a little bit, but now we get to go in and detail. And so it's a big issue, that's actually a giant issue, to be quite frank. It's a 92-page issue.
Yeah.
But we're only going to talk about 25 of those pages.
Oh, I think it's actually closer to like 30, 35 or so. I think it ends up being like almost 2 full like regular issues is what we end up getting. So the book starts out with Daredevil being held prisoner by Mr. Fear, Larry Cranston, and the Enforcers, who he is basically tasked to help him with all the things that he's doing. Cranston, who has resented and been envious of Matt Murdock since his days when they studied law together. So they have a history together. I didn't realize that we get as part of this.
All connected, man.
Yes.
Everything's connected.
And is even more angry about Matt getting his life back together after all the recent tribulations that have happened. Him being outed in the newspaper and whatnot, while he's had to live under a false name, which is what Dan was talking about, living under an assumed name in witness protection, that sort of thing. So he is resolved to destroy Matt Murdock's life. And as Matt asks Mr. Fear what he's done to Mila, because he's convinced that what happened to Melvin Potter is what's going on with Mila. We see the police are taking her into custody. So we're the actions of the subway and that. Foggy Nelson is there. He was there when it happened and is ready to take to her defense and is feverishly trying to locate Matt Murdock and tell him what has happened with his wife. Mr. Fear douses Daredevil with his latest incarnation of the fear gas, and the Ox, who's part of the Enforcer group, throws him out a window. Daredevil fights to remain aware and manages to land in the middle of the street, accidentally getting bumped into by a car. And when the driver of the car gets out, sure.
I've raised my hand to ask Dwayne a question. How did a mostly normal man survive a fall from like 50 floors just by landing on his feet?
I don't know. Comics, man, I guess.
I mean,
yes,
wouldn't that just be a fall to your death? I mean,
yeah, I think he landed like on the Ox or something. So
no,
maybe not.
Right,
I don't know.
He landed, like you said, right on the cement,
yeah.
and then got hit by a car.
Yeah.
And he temporarily sort of tried to grab a gargoyle on the way down or whatever.
That's right.
He should not be walking away from this with less than 4 broken ankles. I mean,
yes, no, I have no idea, but he does, and he's kind of drugged because that gas is causing hallucinations and stuff. So as the driver gets out to check if he's all right, Matt Murdock starts angrily shouting at her, and he's seeing things, and it's at that point we see Mr. Fear. He sees that somehow he survived this giant fall from the building and orders a underworld hunt for Daredevil. And then things sort of kind of go crazy because we're seeing hallucinations that Matt Murdock is seeing, and we're starting to see some of those other artists that we talked about. I love the way that they've done this. They've done this several times where you have some sort of hallucination or some dream sequence or something's going on, and then that's when they start switching artists.
Yep.
And so you start seeing very different styles happening. So a bunch of policemen notice him and go to arrest him, but Matt's not seeing them. Instead, he sees a bunch of ninjas from the Hand. He sees Bullseye. He sees Kingpin coming after him, and he fights them like he's fighting Bullseye and the Kingpin, and he's particularly vicious to Kingpin, who he's like, you shouldn't even be here, you shouldn't be in America, you can't be here. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was, and every time he's doing this, he's badly beating up normal people.
Yes.
Or messing up normal people.
Yes.
Who, when you hit somebody like you're trying to hit, Bullseye, and it's a regular cop or something, they're going to suffer substantial damage, probably.
Yes.
Right? So they do not have plot armor or the need to be recurring characters. So because of that, it is kind of crazy how much damage he's doing. In fact, there's a cop at one point who's just laying there going, "Stop hitting me, please."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a brutal, brutal book. What did you think of the transitions? Because I found that interesting. And by transitions, I mean lack of transitions.
Yeah, there wasn't. It just was like, it was just panel to panel, and they were different, and it was, very stark contrast.
Different because, Michael Lark to Marko Yurdovic is a difference. Yurdovic to Ramada Jr. is like, or Ramada Sr., I'm sorry, is a gulf. And then you go to Gene Colan, who's his own man always, and then to Bill Sienkiewicz, and then to Alex Maleev and to Lee. These are, the last 4 of those are 4 of the most immediately recognizable stylized artists in comics. And it's just like dropping you into a new reality each time one of these guys takes over,
Yep.
So that is the interesting thing, is sometimes they get complementary artists. These artists complement everyone, but not by in any way fitting in, right? They just take over.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I love, though, almost all of these are guys who have worked on Daredevil before, have a history with the character, and are
Yes.
immediately going to be recognized with the character. And in fact, that Sienkiewicz not even so much has a history with Daredevil as he has a history with Elektra. So when there's an Elektra um like segment, he comes in and does that one. And
Yes.
that's fantastic.
We're gonna get to Electra because she does show up in this as well. It's as one would expect if you were gonna do this sort of thing. So after he beats up the cops, he tries to find a quieter place where he won't hurt innocent bystanders as he tries to get out of this hallucination. But he's now finds himself in another hallucination. He sees Karen Page. And after he tries to kiss her, she refrains and tells him that their relationship can never work because, quote, because you have to be the man without fear. And what good is that? Because love is fear, she says. Matt then realizes that he's been trying to kiss a random woman, homeless woman on the street who's trying to help him. A group of Mr. Fear's minions, some of the enforcers try to get Daredevil. And so he tries to get out of the side street that he's in, and he finds himself in San Francisco, where he nearly crashes into the Black Widow, Natasha, who accuses him of beating himself as opposed to all the people around him, and being trying to be too brave in a fight, and unable to face his own feelings, like kind of walling himself off. She leaves, and then Elektra shows up, who teases Matt for clinging to the past. So this hallucination just keeps going, and it is really interesting that we then get all these callbacks to the women that he's loved after we see all the enemies that he's fought, or many of the really important enemies that he's fought.
Yep. And that idea that, especially for him, they all turn out terribly, right?
Yes.
Love is pain for him, right? And that's just the way it goes. But nonetheless, he just has to keep going and keep doing what he does. So I found it really interesting how they moved between these. I also think it's interesting that, like, Ramita, are we at the Ramita one, right?
Yeah, I think we've seen that one.
I also think it's interesting that they bring in Ramita for the romancy kind of one a little bit, because he is sort of someone who had actually had a history doing the romance comics and stuff for Marvel and others way back in the 60s. So he's got a history with both Daredevil and also with the romance comics of previous eras. So it's a cool callback sort of in that way too, to a previous time. This is somebody who knows what he's doing with that sort of story. So
yeah, no, I think that's a great call, and especially since like he did that cover art for that the Our Love Story issue earlier on in the year too. I thought that was good. So the hallucination isn't done. Matt now finds himself as a kid being mocked by other boys in the neighborhood, getting all the way back to kind of that original origin story. He asks an old blind man, if he can help him cross the street, but it's not an old man. It's actually Mila. She runs into the way of a big truck, and Matt saves her, transforming himself into the yellow costumed Daredevil. So very much kind of a combination of the original origin story when he gets blinded and all that, and the meeting of me and saving of Mila Donovan when he saves her from getting hit by a truck. It was really interesting. While there's bystanders are commenting about a kid having been struck in the face by radioactive stuff, Matt tries to retain Mila by his side. So you still see these dueling hallucinations of the origin story and the Mila story. She recriminates him by saying the mask always comes first. As Matt goes to check how the two bystanders shout angrily at him and start beating him. So it's just crazy. And it turns out it's actually just a group of thugs that are actually pounding on him at this point. So the kids that were bullying him are actually just thugs that are on the street trying to take down Daredevil.
Yep. Sounds good.
So he's fighting these thugs, and the hallucination's still going. And Matt finds himself confronting his father, battling Jack Murdock, in the boxing ring. Jack Murdock tells his son not to give in. Quote, "Can't be the man without fear if you let people in, Matt. You can't be a man at all if you don't." So
it's a fantastic line.
That is a fantastic line.
That one struck me too as one of the ones that I wanted to note as something that I thought was like a really, really good takeaway from this. That was really a cool line.
Yeah. So Matt then sees his father die again, and then the effect of the fear gas finally vanishes. Daredevil finds out that he's been surrounded by a whole bunch of ruffians that were trying to get him, which he has knocked down while he was hallucinating. He then heads angrily in search of Larry Cranston to get even. Daredevil reaches Cranston's apartment, but by the time but this time he's cautious, and in fearing a trap, he examines the surroundings from the outside. And while he hears Cranston's voice, which we see is coming from a computer, and he hears a heartbeat, which is a man with glasses that is actually gagged and tied up in a chair in the apartment. He then hears a sound of a bomb detonator about ready to go off, and flees just in time before an explosion blows up the Cranston apartment.
Yep.
So Keen, he tried to get him with the senses, with the heartbeat and with the voice, but it was actually the detonator that ended up giving the trap away. It's at that point Daredevil opts to give this a rest for the night, call it quits on trying to get Mr. Fear, and he returns home. It's at that point Matt reaches home. He finds Foggy there waiting anxiously for him, who's, again, been trying to get to him all night. Foggy breaks the bad news to Matt, which Mila has lost her mind, he says, and not unlike Melvin Potter did earlier, and she's been arrested for murder. And that's how book 1 of the Without Fear story ends, and that's how issue 100 ends. So it sets the stage for this big confrontation ongoing confrontation between Mr. Fear and Daredevil.
Yep.
It is some story, and this was the first part of this story.
Yep.
And this was amazing. And it just, the rest of the story is good, and like the conclusion of it I think was really, really interesting, the fact that he had no antidote to all this. But this issue 100, even though because of the hallucinations and stuff, it didn't necessarily feel like it was about Mr. Fear, it was about all this other stuff, it still was just a fabulous story. And I think that it really, the artists they brought in really executed it really well.
Yep. And so we talked a little bit about One More Day and how Spider-Man, gets the offer and he loses Mary Jane forever and goes back to being single. Essentially, the same thing got done to Daredevil this year.
Yeah.
Because, not to spoil things for folks, but Mila Donovan not going to be around anymore, hanging out with Matt after this, right? She has been essentially this fear gas stuff and whatever. It actually it's real. This is not going to be, or at least as real as something fake in a comic book can be, right?
Yes.
She's not going
to recover from this, really.
Recover from this next week, right?
Yeah.
And so because of this, they have essentially done the same thing with Daredevil that they did with Spider-Man, which is you've got this character who's trying to maintain a long-term relationship. He's married. and they're going to simply sever that. Essentially, in this case, they've got you know, the Deus Ex Machina of the fear gas, but they're going to take her off the board. And it is interesting that this just seems to be the way that Marvel's kind of dealing with things is everybody's going to get set back to their original positions on the board if they just have to, do whatever to get it done. And so there you go.
Do you like the fact that they did that? Like, do you think that it's necessary?
I mean, I don't like the fact that this is now the second of Daredevil's paramours who has been basically put in an asylum after dating him or
Yes.
encountering him. Because we saw the same thing with Mary, right?
Right.
And so, and then, you got another one who gets fridged, essentially, is Karen Page is murdered. So I don't really like the way they deal with any of Daredevil's girlfriends. But it appears that, where Tony Stark seems to have flings and then the women basically throw a drink in his face or something and wander away, they all die after dating Murdock. Which is why essentially maybe he has to just date the most dangerous woman in the world instead, and then he won't have to worry about it. Because
Elektra's not going to let this stuff happen.
Yeah. Exactly. So that would be about the only option. But it's, and I mean, Black Widow has survived him, but she's Black Widow.
Yes, that is true.
It's crazy though, and I do think these are rough ways to go. Like, this is one of those things that again is going to make Matt, if he's got any sort of introspection, wonder about what exactly he's doing with his life, because the people he cares about keep getting badly, badly hurt. I mean, we're not talking a little bit of a scrape once in a while. It's
right,
murdered and psychologically traumatized and, almost murdered and whatever.
And I mean, we do see that. He does say at the end of the Without Fear story arc, I mean, he's talking to Foggy and he says, I've ruined her life. She is now in a hospital upstate and she's there because of me.
Yep.
So I mean, he does he does see that and feels guilty about it. But it's interesting because it's like, how long does that last, right? Because
and the worst thing is that, I mean, it's a thing she's going to be very conscious of, because for the most part she's normal. It's just she can't go anywhere because she's been turned into someone who gets homicidally angry,
right?
And so it's very, very, it's a tough way for a character to go out.
Right.
But there you go.
So that was the spotlight. This was another big issue, another big year for Daredevil, and I just, I did not know about Ed Brubaker before we started reading the Brubaker comics here, and these have been some really good stories too. And I think he was you talked about trying to kind of follow Brian Michael Bendis, and I think he has turned out to be a very, very good storyteller to follow Brian Michael Bendis.
Yeah, and Bendis's stories, I think we've talked about it, have that element of navel gazing and sort of cuteness. They have a rhetorical flourish to them where there's always kind of this, people playing these games and the like. People don't play games in Brubaker's stuff. They just screw up people's lives, And it's the same way with Criminal and a lot of other ones. He has a fantastic ability to write what I would say seem like authentic bad guys to me. People who literally are psychologically unbalanced and who are unbelievably cruel and who are just dangerous at a fundamental level to be around. And it is it makes for really, really great crime comics. And that's what this essentially has turned into now, as a crime comic.
Yes, Mr. Fear, Larry Cranston of Ed Brubaker seems infinitely more terrifying to deal with than the previous iteration of Mr. Fear that we saw.
Yep.
And
say
that
that's
guy,
true.
that guy seemed like he was going to be, well, he was definitely a tough villain and had some really rough story. Like there were, we've seen the hallucination thing before with Matt Murdock and Mr. Fear, but there was just something about this iteration now that he just seemed more terrifying and more unbalanced and more vindictive and more just like, yes, it seemed very, very like a much different and much more formidable opponent for Daredevil than maybe he was previously.
The darkness and the depth of the psychological cruelty here, you would not have seen in most 90s comics. It just wasn't a thing that was done or even thought about. They were more about, over the top violence and maybe some sort of dramatic kind of stuff. But this sort of the thing we've seen in Daredevil for the last decade is just sort of like long-term vindictive planning on the parts of the Owl and Mr. Fear and the Kingpin. Nobody wants to just kill Matt Murdock. It seems like that would be easy. They're like, no, I need to make him suffer. And because of that, they have these outlandish plans, which in the end fail, but they take a massive damage in doing so. So, yeah, it's getting dark out there. And Brubaker is so good. So good.
Yeah. All right, let's move on and let's talk about some of the rapid fire questions, Dan.
All right. Who's Matt Murdock in love with this year?
So it's still Mila, and but they're by the time Without Fear story arc ends, they're not in the best place. She's locked up in a mental hospital, being looked at, cared for protectively, and he's rightfully so saying that he ruined her life because her knowing him caused her to be there.
And also, though, keep in mind that, when he smelled Lily's perfume, it was Karen that was the person that, he went back to. So
Right.
There's that.
Yeah.
And then there's the fact that Mr. Fear had a line someplace near the end when Murdock was about to crash into his building, where he's like, he just is so conceited. He so believes in him. Like nobody's a bigger fan of Matt Murdock's abilities than Matt Murdock. Where he's like, I'm going directly into this trap, but because of whatever, I'm masked and I'm going to be fine and it's fine. And he gets in there, and of course it's not fine. But he hadn't really planned. He's just assuming, and he continues to, not be somebody who really he buys into his own hype a little bit.
he certainly does. Yes.
All right, who's your biggest villain of the year, my man?
I mean, it's got to be Mr. Fear.
100%.
There is no question about it. Him and that new version of the fear gas.
Nope. Now, mind you, the end of last year, though, we had our other biggest villain, who also was doing the Revenge is Best Served Cold.
Yes,
because
Vanessa Fisk. Yeah.
Vanessa Fisk died early on in this year after a relatively convoluted thing. So I think she should also get some votes as the biggest villain of the year.
She got it last year, kind of in covering the beginning of this year too.
All right,
but
we go.
Yes, yeah.
Yep, that makes sense then. Matt practice any law this year?
So I could not remember Matt Murdock being in a courtroom at all this year.
He 100% was, because he got the Kingpin out of jail this year.
Well, yes, I guess, yes.
We didn't see him in the courtroom, but he was practicing law. He got his license back this year.
Yes.
So he is now a
Again,
lawyer
I
again.
was thinking about it in the stories that the main stories we were talking about this year, which did not include the story that bled into this year for me. So that's
No.
why I said that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, but it was actually during this year that he had his
Yes, it
license
did.
back.
It did actually happen because that was
Yep.
at the end of the Devil
Previous
Takes a
arc.
Ride
Yep.
storyline, which would have been February or
Yep.
March.
Anyone knew Nomad's identity?
No, I don't think so.
Do you think most people are now convinced that Matt Murdock is not Daredevil by all of the other Daredevils running around and all of the other stuff going on? Or are the police just not taking his mask off because they don't want to confirm who he is and deal with the whole ball of wax?
I know. I mean, it does seem like most people still think that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, but nobody seems to want
No,
to.
and all the bad guys are kidnapping Matt Murdock's wife, assuming Daredevil's going to be pissed off about this and everything. And so, yeah,
Right.
yep, I think you're
Yeah.
probably
So
right.
it is the open secret that it's been.
Daredevil's still a good guy this year.
So this was difficult for me. So I'm going to say genuinely, I think this was one of Daredevil's better years of being a good guy. I think I there was nothing that jumps out to me as something that he did that was overly questionable. He was definitely trying to look out for Mila this year after she gets arrested and
Yep.
he was confronting Mr. Fear, trying to get an antidote and all this sort of thing. Um, though, if you think about the Our Love story, the fact that he kind of is out there helping Hell's Kitchen isn't good for his relationship with Mila. So, like, is he a good guy to Hell's Kitchen? Yes. Is he a good guy to his girlfriend? Maybe not so much.
Wife.
Wife, yes, wife
But
at this point.
I will note that in this case, though, she is, and that's the other thing that I think, well, obviously he feels bad. Mila is someone who is one of the first who literally, is eyes wide open on this whole
Yes,
thing. She is 100% like, I know there's risks, I'm taking the risks. And so because of that, she also understands why he's out there, even though it scares her. So I don't
yes,
I don't actually think that at this point he's not going against the wishes of his wife the way he had many of his girlfriends. I think you're right.
yes,
I'll give this as being one of his least questionable years on record in
yes,
terms of his actions. So,
right.
which is interesting because Brubaker's characters almost always exist in the deepest,
In the
murkiest
gray,
side of the
yeah,
pool. So,
yeah.
how about the Daredevil outfit? Change it all?
I couldn't think of any changes this year. It's been a while since we've had some changes that I
And
can
yet, in
recall.
episode 100 or issue 100, he wore essentially 6 or 7 different costumes because every one of those guys did different boots and different seams and different
Yes,
everything. It's
there is
amazing how
that.
they've all got their own style on that costume. Wally Wood made a classic costume that nonetheless seems to allow everybody to kind of put their own little mark on it, which is
Right.
cool. Anything new about Matt's past?
So I wouldn't say there was anything major, but like in the Our Love story,
Yep.
we saw little bits of their relationship that we hadn't seen before. And my bet, even though I didn't read it, that Daredevil Battle and Jack Murdock book probably had
It definitely
some
did. Yep.
bits and pieces there too that we didn't know previously.
Some interactions with his parent, like Matt's parents and stuff like that we hadn't seen. A
Yeah,
lot of interactions with him and his dad, and then a lot more about the actual fatal day when his dad died after the fight. So,
right.
biggest moment of the year?
So I have that Mila killing a man in the subway over the jealousy of Lily Luca. I think that obviously was specifically done to move a plot and a story along, but it was by far, I think, the most shocking and like memorable moment of the year.
All right. Interesting. So, just as a note, and I'm not sure if we had this as a moment from last year or if it was something else. You did Matt and Foggy's reunion as last year's, correct? So even though I think that technically counted in this year, you put
yes,
that one in. Okay, then I would
yeah.
agree. Then I think that if we've already done that one, then Milla shoving the guy in the subway. And what she actually did is she tried to push Lily onto the subway tracks and instead pushed Lily into some guy standing there who got pushed onto the subway tracks.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, so not good. Not a good look for her. But all right, sounds good. Excellent answers. That was a big moment.
Yeah, so that really does wrap it up for this year. I'm really interested in seeing where Brubaker and Lark take the story going forward because, like, yeah, Daredevil is sort of down and out right now, and I'm not quite sure where that then leads us.
Yep, it's kind of crazy.
All right,
all kind of crazy.
So one more piece of business we need to do before we wrap up for this week. Let's talk about the takeaway. This week's takeaway. So Dan, a lot happened in 2007. There's some awesome stories that were done, some big movies, some successful, some decidedly less so. If you were to look back at 2007 and try and encapsulate everything, what would be your takeaway for this year?
I think that to me, this year is at best bittersweet, and probably, if nothing else, is a harbinger for the first time, really, of the problems that are going to sort of fracture comics in the coming decades. And these fractures, I think, have had real costs. I know there are folks out there who believe that it's important to somehow, gatekeep and hold the companies to a certain standard or whatever. But essentially, some of the factions that have started trying to, stop movies from making profits or review bomb them and all this other stuff, in the end, it seems to me that either a comic does well and the greater culture sees that success and says, hey, maybe comics are doing cool things, or something like, comic property fails and everybody starts looking at it as, well, comics have had their moment, or they're not really worth our attention. What I think happened in 2007, and I'm going to give 3 examples of things that are sort of bellwethers for problems or worries to come. Zack Snyder coming into the comics world with 300. I have nothing against Zack Snyder. I think he makes cool movies. I think his fans are nuts. Unfortunately, what he had done is he made an unabashedly hyper-masculine conception of the 300 book, which is what Frank Miller had made essentially. It's got a very strong female character in the Queen, but nonetheless, it is something that is a colossally testosterone-fueled narrative, and the imagery follows that. That is going to then move into Watchmen, and it's going to move into Justice League, and he's going to develop a way of sort of visualizing the comic book media and superheroes especially, but even with 300, that's going to have a massive effect on a large part of the comic book reading or comic movie watching or comic interested base. For now, I don't think it's a problem. 300, super successful. Everybody loved it. It is exactly what it is. And I don't think you could have asked for a better adaptation of 300. The material itself is kind of questionable from certain ways, and that follows into the movie, but that's the way that goes. But so Zack Snyder's arrival is going to herald some crazy stuff in the future. One More Day in the comics gives us a moment where, with the internet, with fandom being more easily and quickly connected, you see this explosion of anger at Marvel over what has happened in the comic. And so that has a massive effect on later decisions by the company when they see this sort of backlash come and the sort of anger and the sort of online presence that those sort of folks can have, right? I don't necessarily disagree with some of the anger. I think that making Peter Parker lose everything he had like that, instead of just making a new, younger Spider-Man, probably didn't make a lot of sense. Let people from the previous generation keep the characters they love. The problem is that the sort of marketing arm can't have that because Peter Parker always has to be able to sell kids' underwear, right?
Yeah.
Has to be able to sell lunchboxes. Not going to be able to do that if he's 45 and getting ready to have grandkids. So, hence, I get why it was changed. I get why people were angry at it. But the visceral nature and the backlash over it primarily happened because comics as a fandom had gotten so old that there really weren't that many young people there to celebrate the fact that there was a young Peter Parker, that there was a young Peter Parker, and there were a lot of older guys there who were losing something that felt important to them. So in many ways, it's a sign that comic fandom, at least in the shops, in the direct market, had gotten old enough now that Marvel was starting to sort of have a problem with how they were going to connect to younger fans while keeping the older fans.
Right.
And then you have Fantastic Four, the movie, which comes out, and similarly, it has a change to an established character. Galactus looks weird, and the movie's a little strange. It's also a fun movie in some ways, if you just disagree or, disregard all of that. It's not a great movie. But the problem is that for the first time, I think what we saw was online comic fans, or comic in quote fans, if you want to call them that, getting so angry about what they perceived as an inaccurate depiction of the original texts that they essentially flooded the online sphere with negative comments and negative sort of emotions, actually causing the movie to be treated with less respect and less interest by the culture at large. I'm sure that the anger of those comics fans towards Galactus and the Cloud thing actually caused the box office to go down and made fewer people go to watch Fantastic Four. And this is a problem we're going to have over and over and over again. It's not something we had before. When Catwoman was terrible, there was no real internet to speak of, right? The internet was DARPANET or something like this still at that point. And so there weren't a bunch of people screaming online about how this is not their Selina Kyle, right? Or any Selina Kyle at all, actually. It's changed fundamentally in the next decade. And so I think that what we're starting to see here is the parameters put in place for what's going to be a fragmenting of the comic sphere into these groups that are yelling at each other and tearing at each other. And that's not going to be good for the hobby as a whole. Now, we're not going to see it all the time for a while. I don't know that we have another dust up like One More Day for many years after this, And it's not all the time. When Captain America died, that was handled in a way that the fans seemed to be okay with, and nobody lost their minds over it. So it'll happen more and more as the years go by, but it's still, at this point, you don't see it all the time.
Yeah.
But I think these three things are kind of that warning sign that the beautiful years of 2005 and 2006, which were fantastic years for comics, 2007 starting to feel some warning signs.
It's very interesting. I would, now that you say it, it does feel like these are seeds that are very important, that it basically is sort of the thing that is happening now because it started way back in 2007.
You didn't really sort of see these kinds of organized anger campaigns toward certain stories or certain movies in the comics realm until right about now. I think these are the first two I remember that people really were up in arms about.
Yeah.
I mean, we hated All-Star Batman, but that was different. That was more just being sad. So
Yeah.
anyway.
All right, that's an interesting takeaway, and I'm definitely interested in seeing how this looks going forward. And to your point, it's not going to be every year, but it does feel like it's happening more and more frequently, especially as we get into the late teens and now into the 2020s.
It is every year now. It's every movie.
Yeah.
It's all movies. There, currently we're recording in 2025. There are people who are out angry and organized trying to kill Fantastic Four because now Galactus is what he's used to look like, but the Silver Surfer's a woman, and they're angry about that. There's people who are angry at the James Gunn Superman movie and want it to fail just because they believe that will bring back the Snyderverse. There are people who are angry at just about everything that gets done, simply because it's not exactly what they would have wanted, or it doesn't follow their perception of how it should be done. And it's killing us as an industry because we really need everybody to just get out there and go, these both look awesome. Everyone should go see these movies because they're about comic books.
Yes.
So
all right,
there we go.
So I think that's a good point to end on. Thank you, Dan, for a good takeaway this week, and that is going to wrap it up for us for this week. We'd like to thank you all for joining us. If you're new to the podcast, please consider subscribing on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get each new episode as soon as it's released. If you've already subscribed, we'd appreciate if you'd share the show via social media or leave us a review. That'll help other new listeners find the show that much easier. Now, whether you're new to the podcast or you've been with us from the beginning, we'd love to get your thoughts on this week's show. What did you think of Daredevil in 2007? I'd love to get more thoughts on the year that Ed Brubaker, Michael Lark and company put together, as well as maybe what your takeaway was from 2007. You can send us those comments via email. That address is comments@comicsovertime.com, or you can reach out to us via Blue Sky. We are at Comics Overtime there. Another year done in the books, Dan. 2007 is done. Next week, we start 2008.
Forward to it. We'll see how this goes. There's a bunch of cool stuff.
I was going to say, I feel like there was a pretty big movie that came out that had, Robert Downey Jr. in it in 2008.
The world changes next year. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. It's going to be interesting. So, and we'll also have, like the fallout from last year with Brand New Day and a bunch of things in Marvel. DC has some cool comics. There's other movies, all sorts of stuff. It's, again, like I said, accelerating. We may need to split to 3 podcasts each year.
Oh my goodness! Please no, please no.
All right.
And on that note, until next week, take care, everybody.
Catch you later, folks.